Considering that scientific studies on homosexual and non-traditional marriage and its effect on children have found that children raised by two same-gender parents do as well, on average, as children raised by two different gender parents, on what basis do you justify your claim that children have a right to have a relationship with their father and mother, and more specifically, only that combination of parents?
Good. Thank you so much for the question. I think this is really important. First of all, I make the basis of the claim that they have a right to the mother and father because it's one of the most self-evident rights out there, probably the only trumped by a parent's right to the child that they bear. So, and that's something that's recognized in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child that your country ratified in 1990. So it's widely accepted. Next, let's talk about the studies, because this is critical. That, interestingly, whenever you are studying family structure, when you are not talking about same-sex parenting, social scientists tend to agree on three things. Number one, that non-biological parents tend to be more transitory, invest less time and energy and resources into kids, and be more dangerous to kids. Number two, they find that anytime a child loses a parent, that trauma is involved, and that can affect a child in the long term. And then they also agree that men and women parent differently, and they offer distinct and complementary gifts to their kids. So whenever you're not talking about same-sex parenting, you're not studying same-sex households, social scientists agree on all of those three things. But suddenly, when you study same-sex households, even though all three of those are going to be a factor every single time, suddenly children fare just as well. Now, my question is, do you think that that could possibly be because those studies that show that there's no difference do not use random samples, and that most of them derive their participants through recruited and volunteer studies?
Katy, can I just interrupt you, because we do actually have effectively a case study. It's a question that's come in from Craig Mack, and let's hear Craig's story, and then the others can comment on this as well.
So, Katy, as a child, I grew up with my single, drug-dealing, junkie, sometimes hooker mother in an environment that was surrounded by drugs, bikies, domestic violence, child abuse, drug overdoses, death, and police raids. I could roll the perfect joint at 6, and so much more. At 15, I moved in with my gay uncle and his partner of 25 years. Only then did I experience a normal, stable, safe, structured environment that everybody else takes for granted. I've never understood the argument against marriage equality because of the potential damage to children. I'd be dead, in jail, or following in my mother's footsteps if it weren't for the two stable gay men who took me in. So my question to you is, as a child of two loving parents, can you explain the damage that that's done? And how are the risks any lesser with a straight couple?
Good. Thank you, Craig. So, yeah. So about 10 years ago, I was maybe more, I was invited by two women to travel with them to adopt a child that had special needs in an overseas institution. And I said, heck yes, I'm going with you. And I know, so hateful, huh? But I said, absolutely, right? That you are going to try and repair a damaged situation for a child. You're not inflicting motherlessness or fatherlessness on this child. Really, you are trying to repair something that has been lost, just like so many grandparents do and so many aunts and uncles do when the relationship between mother and father break down and that child is in need of some kind of rescue. And in that situation, I would say that adoption agencies need to have all options on the table because you're trying to repair a broken situation. But what we don't want is a system or a family structure that permits intentional fatherless and motherlessness. And because government's interest in marriage is children, it's not how you feel about somebody. Government's interest in marriage is children. And so redefining marriage redefines parenthood into an institution where mothers and fathers are not necessary and they're optional. And that's really not the case in the life of a child. When a child loses a parent, the ones I've talked to, they tend to mourn the loss of that parent. So while I absolutely would say we've got to get in and do life with couples that are doing their best to help a child in a broken situation, that's very different than institutionalizing a family structure where
Katy,
children will always lose one or the other.
I'm sorry to draw you to a conclusion on that point, but I want to hear from the other panellists. Richard Di Natale.
Well, I suppose I'm a little concerned that we've gone from equal marriage, which is a very different debate, to parenting, and let's accept the... I mean, we support and as a society, the right of same-sex couples to be parents. And we do it because, look, there's lots of pseudoscience and gobbledygook out there about the effects on kids. Almost every study demonstrates that the most important factor is whether a child is raised in a loving household.
That's actually not what the studies say, though.
Your case study demonstrates that. It's not biology that influences whether you've got a happy, healthy, well-balanced child. It's whether they grow up in a loving household. And if there's any issue that kids growing up in an environment with same-sex parents have to face, it's the discrimination towards their parents. And it's that issue that we should be tackling, not this nonsense argument about whether people of the same sex should be able to raise a child. I mean, we've had that debate. That's gone. We're now having a debate around marriage and whether people should be able to marry. And look, Brendan, your issue of, this is a straw man, that suddenly all these advocates are out there waiting to storm cake shops because they support gay marriage. It's nonsense. And of course, I accept we're in a pluralist society and you have to accept that people have different views. But you should also be prepared to name it. And the issue with marriage is this for me. Marriage is an expression of love and commitment between two people. That's what it is. Now, why do we say that one couple should be entitled to express that love and commitment publicly and yet another couple can't do that? The only justification for that is that you think that the love between those people is somehow lesser, it's worth less, it's not as important, and it's different. And that's what prejudice is. Okay.